Katt Williams calling the police on Kevin Hart. The title of this video promised something explosive. Katt Williams calling the police on Kevin Hart. And while the full story is messier, more complicated, and honestly more interesting than that headline suggests, it starts exactly where you'd expect it to. With Katt Williams, a microphone, and absolutely no filter. Williams dropped into Atlanta's V103 morning show on a Friday, supposedly just there to promote some upcoming appearances. What followed was anything but routine. He had reportedly been promised beforehand that certain topics were off the table: his kids, his legal cases, anything too personal. That agreement did not hold. What came out instead became the station's most viewed clip by a wide margin. Williams was a guest alongside comedian Red Grant, who had shows in Atlanta that weekend. The interview would have already turned heads based on the shots Williams took at comedians like Gerard Carmichael, Lil Rel, Kevin Hart, and Hannibal Buress. But the moment that truly went nuclear was when Katt turned his attention to Tiffany Haddish, who was riding high off her star-making performance in 2017's Girls Trip. Williams questioned why her success had come so fast, suggesting she hadn't paid her dues, hadn't grounded out long enough to deserve the level of recognition she was now enjoying. In Katt's world, nobody gets to skip the line. But while the shots at fellow comedians were making headlines, a separate portion of the same interview was quietly catching fire on Black Twitter. About 15 minutes into his rant, Williams directed his attention to radio host Wanda Smith, and what followed was the kind of sharp, personal roast that makes everyone watching cover their mouth. He went after her hair, her weight, her cooking. It was cutting, it was fast, and it spread across social media instantly. People were either laughing, horrified, or both. Here's where things shift from funny to serious. According to reports from multiple local outlets, Williams later told Gwinnett County Police that Smith's husband, Lamora Sellers, had aimed a gun directly at his face. The incident allegedly took place outside the Atlanta Comedy Theater in Norcross, a venue where Smith regularly hosted. Williams had shown up that evening to support another comic. When he spotted Smith on the sidewalk outside the club, he allegedly approached her and said, "I told you messing with me will make you go viral." That statement alone tells you everything about Katt Williams' state of mind that night. He had not come there with regret. He walked into that parking lot and threw it back in her face. What happened next, though, was something Katt wasn't prepared for. The police report states that Williams told officers Sellers pointed a gun at his face. Katt and his security guard fled to the food depot next door, where officers made initial contact with them. Sellers gave a completely different account, that Williams had been aggressive, that he simply chased him into the food depot, and that during the pursuit, his gun had fallen from his waistband rather than being pointed at anyone. Two accounts, one incident, and a security guard who witnessed the whole thing and reported seeing no gun at any time. Surveillance footage from the store did show Sellers chasing Williams, but confirmed no weapon visible on camera. What made it all stranger was what happened next. Katt Williams, the man who called the police, refused to cooperate with investigators. Officers visited his home and got nowhere. Williams ultimately chose not to press charges. Police noted that depending on what video they could obtain, charges could potentially still be filed independently. But Katt had already walked away from the very situation he'd created. He called the police, told them a gun was pointed at his face, and then went silent. And through all of that chaos, Kevin Hart's name was already in the mix. One of the targets Katt had been publicly firing at just days before the incident. But to understand why Hart specifically has always been in Katt's crosshairs, you have to go back further. Back to where this rivalry actually took root. Within black comedy circles, the tension between Katt Williams and Kevin Hart had been simmering for years before it ever boiled over publicly. Williams had been in the game longer. He was the original high-energy, short black comedian who commanded a stage with big physicality and even bigger storytelling. That was his identity, his lane. He built his name the hard way: clubs, late nights, hustle, and raw, unfiltered material that connected with black audiences in a way that felt almost spiritual. He had the specials. He had the films. Friday After Next, Norbit, First Sunday. He had a genuine cult following. He was that guy. And then Kevin Hart arrived, and the comparisons were immediate. Both short, both high energy. The industry and the internet started drawing lines between the two men that Katt never asked for and certainly didn't appreciate. For years, That tension represented a larger divide within comedy itself. Hart stood for mainstream commercial success, blockbuster films, corporate partnerships, the kind of visibility that comes from saying yes to everything. Williams positioned himself as the outspoken outsider, someone who believed the industry rewarded marketability over real talent. That disagreement about what it actually means to make it would define the entire arc of their relationship. Kevin Hart said yes to everything. Every set, every interview, every movie offer, every costume, every line. And it worked spectacularly. In the eyes of some observers, Hart essentially made a calculated decision. If he couldn't beat Katt in pure stand-up credibility, he'd take every role Katt turned down and not lose a moment of sleep over being in a bad movie. So Hart went that route and became one of the biggest names in Hollywood. Katt went a different direction, maintaining his status as a revered comic but never quite crossing into mainstream household name territory, all while legal troubles kept pulling him out of the spotlight at the worst possible moments. Katt first started making passive-aggressive comments in 2014, when Hart's film career began gaining real traction with movies like Ride Along, Think Like a Man 2, and Top 5. Those weren't random jabs. They were the words of a man watching someone else occupy space he believed should have been his. That same year, Katt alleged that he had played a role in shaping Kevin Hart as a comedian. And by 2016, during his conspiracy theory comedy tour in Atlanta, he had escalated to calling Hart a Hollywood puppet. That word, puppet, mattered. It wasn't just shade. It was an allegation. Katt was claiming that Kevin Hart didn't reach the top on his own terms, that the industry had decided he was going to be the guy and pulled the strings accordingly. For Katt, this wasn't simply about who worked harder. It was a claim that the game was rigged, and Kevin either didn't know it or didn't care. Hart never responded to Katt directly. Instead, he posted a photo on Instagram, himself alongside Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock at the Oscars, with a caption about unity, sticking together, and not tearing each other down. He never said Katt's name. He didn't have to. The message was unmistakable. I'm up here. Where are you? The 2018 V103 incident wasn't the first time Katt Williams used a public platform to take shots at Kevin Hart and those in his orbit. But it was the first time the fallout spilled into something requiring police involvement. And it was the first time Hart responded loudly enough for everyone to hear. The tension between them had resurfaced months earlier when Williams publicly criticized Tiffany Haddish's rapid rise in Hollywood, ahead of her co-starring role alongside Hart in the 2018 film Night School. For Kevin, attacking Tiffany was crossing a line. He had real history with her, not industry small talk, actual history. He knew where she came from and what road she'd walked to get where she was. On The Breakfast Club, Hart said he remembered the days when Tiffany Haddish was sleeping out of her car, when she was homeless, when she didn't have a dime, and that at the height of her career, when most people should celebrate, some choose to tear down instead. Tiffany herself responded with grace. She tweeted at Katt, simply telling him she wanted to shower him with real love because he needed it. She killed him with kindness. But Kevin wasn't done. Once he was behind a microphone defending someone he genuinely cared about, the gloves started coming off. Hart told Williams directly, "You keep pointing at Hollywood, pointing at the white man, pointing at the system. But when do you take responsibility for your own actions? You had the shot. You were the guy? You didn't show up to work. That was it." The one argument Katt Williams had spent years carefully constructing, that he was a victim of a rigged system, dismantled in a single sentence. Not a philosophical debate, just a direct accountability check. You had the shot, and you didn't show up. Hart also pushed further, asking whether Williams had ever used his platform to lift up the comedians beneath him. His answer was an indictment. You haven't. So don't sit on the ones who now are. 3 people responded to Katt Williams after that V103 interview. Tiffany Haddish took the high road and met him with love. Kevin Hart went straight for his work ethic. And Charlemagne the God handed him a donkey of the day. Not one of them flinched. And when Hart later reflected on his own response, he said he regretted publicly addressing Katt at all. In an interview on Charlemagne's podcast, Hart explained it plainly. "I should have never addressed him at all. What do I gain? I look at everything from a business and economic standpoint." That was a man who had made the calculation. Katt Williams wasn't a career threat. Engaging with him cost more than it earned. And from that point forward, Kevin Hart's public position was simple: I'm above this. Then came January 2024. If the puppet comment and the V103 fallout were warning shots. The Club Shay Shay interview was the full artillery assault. Shannon Sharpe gave Katt Williams 2 hours and a microphone, and Katt did not waste a second of it. He accused Hart of being an industry plant, claimed no one in Hollywood had any memory of attending a sold-out Kevin Hart show before his fame, of there ever being a line for him, of a standing ovation at any comedy club. He alleged Hart already had his deals when he arrived in LA, a sitcom in his first year, a film lead shortly after, and asked the audience to consider what that actually looks like. Williams also revealed something striking about his own choices. By his own account, virtually every film Kevin Hart went on to star in had crossed his inbox first. He turned most of them down, often because he wanted to adjust the characters to better fit his vision. Kevin said yes. Katt said no. Kevin Hart is now reportedly worth $450 million. Katt Williams, around $2 million. That's a $448 million gap, and by Katt's own admission, the divide traces directly back to those decisions. The Club Shay Shay interview pulled 83 million views on YouTube. It made Katt Williams, already a legend among comedy purists, a mainstream cultural figure again in a way he hadn't been in years. But it also created a storyline too compelling for Hollywood to leave untouched. Hart later revealed on Carmelo Anthony's podcast that the two had privately spoken and were beginning to move toward a better place. Before any cameras, before any stage, these two men had already picked up a phone. Whatever was said, it cracked the door open just enough. Then came Sunday night, May 10th, 2026 at the Kia Forum in Los Angeles. During Netflix is a Joke Festival's roast of Kevin Hart, actress Regina Hall surprised the audience by bringing out Williams, draped in a black hat and a long leather cape. The room went electric. When Katt stepped onto that stage, many expected another escalation. What they got was something far more complicated. Williams wasted no time. He joked about being invited despite their history, suggesting Hart had so little star power left that he had to start calling his enemies. "I won an Emmy, but tonight will be my best acting," he said. Even with peace seemingly on the table, he wasn't pulling punches. He revisited his claim that Hart had taken movie roles he passed on, and the crowd ate it up. Hart fired back in his rebuttal set. He listed the films Katt was allegedly claiming he turned down: Jumanji, Ride Along, Central Intelligence, The Upside, and more, before landing the punchline. "So you turned all of that down to do a cameo in Norbit?" But then, before the laughter had fully settled, Hart shifted. He looked at Katt and told the crowd that the two of them had been at odds for years, and that right now, live on television, they had an opportunity to put it behind them. He offered an olive branch. He said he wanted to be a brother. He said he wanted to move on. Williams walked over, shook his hand, and embraced him. The audience erupted. But was it real? One commentator noted that she could almost feel Katt Williams rolling his eyes in his mind, that he shook the hand, accepted the moment, and walked off without the traditional roast sign-off, without the "we do it because we love you," without acknowledging what Kevin had just said. Kevin, for his part, described the hug in the same rebuttal set as some of the best fake acting he'd ever done in his career. Was that a joke? Almost certainly. Was there truth buried inside it? Possibly. That's the nature of comedians. They use the stage to say what they'd never say directly. Near the close of the event, Hart made his position clear. The beef between him and Katt is over. He said he loved the fact that Katt showed up and showed out. So here's where the title actually lands. Katt Williams did not literally call the police on Kevin Hart at some backstage altercation. The police involvement stems from the 2018 chain of events that Katt set in motion himself. By going on that radio show, taking shots at Kevin Hart, Tiffany Haddish, and Wanda Smith, and then showing up at the comedy club that same week to rub it in Smith's face. The gun incident, the police report, the refusal to cooperate, all of it traces back to that one Friday morning interview. Kevin Hart was the inciting name, the recurring target, and ultimately the last man standing across a decade of one of comedy's most fascinating rivalries. Whether the piece on that roast stage was genuine or just two very talented performers giving the crowd what it wanted, that question may never have a clean answer. Katt Williams walked off without saying thank you. Kevin Hart called the hug the best acting of his career. And somewhere between those two truths is exactly where this story actually lives. If you found this one worth your time, drop a comment below. What do you actually think? Was that moment real? Or was it the greatest performance of the night? Subscribe if you want to keep up with stories like this one.